This week on Mailbag, it's reaction time. Prices are changing, and it's time to make sure you have all the key pieces in place to set your season up. Plus, we'll answer all your questions. Hello and welcome to the Footy Mailbag. My name is Damo, and here with me is Clarky. How are you, mate?
My team is garbage, both in Supercoach and in football, which means that I am finally free. I'm free earlier than normal this year, listeners, because I am now football neutral, as they call it. And I care only for improving my Supercoach team, which means I am bringing my best advice this week.
Yeah, let's not talk about actual football because that is a burning fire at the moment. Clarky, what caught your eye this week?
What caught my eye this week? What caught my eye is that we are not blessed with defensive rookies. We are absolutely not blessed with defensive rookies. However, the plus side is that we actually are on the bubble this week. So what caught my eye is that I've got all these sweet, sweet rookies ready to start making me some cash.
Yeah. What caught my eye is a lot of people traded out Lachie Neale, and then he went and scored a 133, and now I believe he is up the top of most traded in. And you pick premiums to keep him. One poor performance shouldn't dictate whether you keep or yeet a premium, and we're seeing we're seeing that in full effect.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk about that a little bit more. I think we did talk about it briefly last week, but a tag is alive and well.
The tag is alive and well. We actually have a question about the tag coming up.
Yeah, so the rumors of its death are greatly exaggerated. So I think it's probably something that we need to keep in mind when we're being reactionary and actually looking at the data in the sense of I'm gonna throw another name. So Lachie Neale's an easy example of that. One poor clamps from James Jordan, and nothing he could do about that. We still know he's a great player. Comes out this week against West Coast, scores a 133. Somebody else we probably need to maybe consider before we react is one William Day. And that's going to catch my eye this week is how many people are jumping off Day now that Callahan's coming back from his bye, and obviously Hawthorn go into their bye next week. Do we react hard to Will Day is actually going to be the target for Hawthorn going forward, right? Like we know that he's pretty much copped 3 in a row. Right, he played one half of football and scored 110 points or whatever it was in round 0, and then received a tag for the next, what's the math on that, like 9 quarters of football.
Next two and a half games, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so how harshly do we judge that?
I mean, that's the one thing that people need to weigh up with Will Day is, and people have to be honest with themselves here. Was Will Day a point chase, or was it someone who you genuinely thought could come out of round 0 and back up those performances week in and week out? And you mentioned the tag, but I haven't seen him resting forward or having the same impact as a resting forward that he had against the Swans. He's not getting those free kicks. He's not kicking those goals. He's not adding that string to his bow that he had when he scored all those points against Sydney. What sold the people that brought him in off that performance outside of the fact that he scored that amount of points? Like, are we really being honest with ourselves, the people that brought him in, that it wasn't just a point chase, that you believe the role is there and that he is going to be okay?
Well, I think the other thing is exactly what you said, right? We noticed that he's not resting forward because they don't have space for him to really rest there. With James Warple out as well, they're kind of relying on him, Newcomb, and then sort of a mixture, a smattering of who's left over to sort of run through that mid. And we saw it last week against Carlton where he was being suffocated, right? And just constantly, but he was still in the contest and he was still attempting to get ball. So I think there's an argument both ways, right? And this is going to be up to you, individual listener, just like Damo said, to decide what your belief is, because he comes up against Toby Bedford this week, who we know is probably one of the top 3 taggers. Let's go. It's James Jordan, Toby Bedford, and then the question mark. Whoever can be third.
It's probably Alex Chincotta when he's fit.
Yeah, Chincotta, Mark O'Connor.
Mark O'Connor does okay. Mark O'Connor is more of a run with. He doesn't nullify. He just kind of limits.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
So after Toby Bedford, Will Day then has Port Adelaide after their bye, who I don't think they have a
Willem
specific...
Drew.
Yeah, Willem
Drew can do it.
Yeah.
But again, he doesn't nullify. He just kind of runs with and limits output.
Yeah, it comes up against Port Adelaide, Geelong, West Coast, and Richmond. So you could probably argue, and then Melbourne. So you could probably arguably say for those next run of games after the Hawthorn bye, he probably has a pretty good chance of being unbothered, right? Or like an opportunity to be a bit cleaner with his ball, to actually get some of his disposals off instead of getting tackled with it. Because he gave away a lot. He gave away a lot of frees this week as well because he was trying to fight through that contest. I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's interesting to think about, and it's something that not only we've spoken about Will Day specifically, but this is something we should be considering for all premiums, right? Like you probably need to. Well, I say premiums if you consider Will Day a premium in his potential, but maybe not his actual scoring right now. It's probably something that we need to keep in mind. Christian Petrarca as well is probably another great example, coming off a 78, where. Oh, God, I'm remembering the results in the weekend. North Melbourne absolutely took him out of any effectual game. Clayton Oliver racked up possession, thankfully, which is fantastic. That was probably my highlight of the week, seeing Clayton Oliver get 30-plus disposals. But Christian Petrarca was essentially removed from the equation in what was already a poor day for Melbourne. So these guys, you have to decide now. This is probably the last week to decide whether you're ride or die. Because if you don't do it this week, you need to then move your focus onto economy and upgrade, because you're not going to have time or the trades to really worry about it until towards the end, right? Like if Will Day comes good, he's probably an M8 at his worst, and at best probably, a top 15, say mid.
Clarky, I think we need to apologise to our listeners. We said that Harry Perryman is probably a hold and a wait and see for one more week. We were wrong.
No, we were right. We waited.
Were we?
We saw. Yeah. It's shit.
Yeah, we were wrong and trade him. But in his defense, to play devil's advocate, I don't think he expected Reef McInnes to rupture his ACL and then he has to play that role for the rest of that game. Yeah. So it's not entirely Harry Perryman's fault, but in terms of super coach, it's not good. So it's time to let him go.
Yeah. I think this is it. This is the straw, I think, where it's kind of, as you said, I'm very comfortable feeling that we gave, at the time, what seemed like good advice, and your avocado is noted, but, we would have had to predict an ACL in order to be completely wrong, because still 57, even with the terrible role that he had, and that sort of Collingwood Footscray game, which was a bit contentious, we'll say, in terms of result and during play. I think easily, if he had probably had the role we expected pre-injury, he probably only improves on that, though, by maybe, I wouldn't even say, not 40 points. There's maybe probably another 30 points there if he's not busy filling a gap and filling gaps around the ground. So this is the week. He's on his bye. It's time to move him on. And I think there's some fantastic options around his price point, or relatively achievable from that trade if you have a nice bit of kitty in the bank.
Absolutely. Another thing that really threw a cat among the pigeons on the weekend was Matthew Flynn was omitted from the West Coast team. He was a lot of people's flex, and some people held him because it was best 18. Some people decided to let him go. There's probably some scary Andrew McQualter quotes for the people that have held him, and none more scarier than they're going to hold a competition at training every week, and whoever wins is playing ruck that week. So it could be Matthew Flynn, it could be Bailey Williams, it could be literally anyone. It might even be Ruben Jinby this week. We have no idea.
Only if he wins the contest. He has to win the contest of ruck. So I think the uncertainty is too much, especially for a flex, right? Flex is meant to be a bit of a fun, not fun, but like a bit of, it's your gambling spot, right? And you can't gamble with a guy who might not even be in the best 22 every week.
Absolutely. Clarky, you mentioned that we need the cash generation and the points in the right place because prices are going to go up and down this week. So that means that everyone has to have the right rookies in place. There's not a lot of rookies in defense, although there is some that you probably want. Most of the rookies in the midfield or in the forward line. So for me, I think you probably need Riley Bice, but wait for him next week when Sydney are actually back playing. Connor O'Sullivan at Geelong is someone you probably want as well, but Chris Scott has mentioned that Sam DeConning won't be rucking solo every week, and Jake Kolodjasny is also due back very, very soon. So I have him low on my priority list just because of the perceived job security, despite the performances, and we all know that Chris Scott is a creature of habit and cares not for our Supercoach teams.
What do you mean? I thought he was meant to be the better Scott. I thought he really cared for us.
Other rookies you need: Nathan O'Driscoll, Levi Ashcroft, Sam Davidson, Jack Henderson, Xavier Lindsay, and Mitch Nevitt. You have those guys and you're setting yourself up pretty well. The guys that you probably don't need to hold on to: Finn O'Sullivan. I mean, you can keep him. He's probably going to have a really good game very soon. He's got the talent. Is just we didn't pay 200k for a rookie to score 40s. So I reckon you could spend some of that cash to at least upgrade elsewhere or fix your Harry Perryman problem if you have one. Ben Patton, he did really well in the VFL practice matches, so he might come in after the bye. So maybe hold him, and if he doesn't return, he's the one who you move to Riley Bice. And I think you can't keep both of Zach Reed and Luke Traynor. Keep one, get rid of the other.
Okay. Good to note as well that Jackson Pryor and Zach Reed have both been named for the game tonight by the time you're listening to this, listeners. So that's good. And we also have a defensive rookie coming in. Saad El Hawley has been named for his debut game. Hopefully that may come good for us as a trade-in option to cash out on some of these. I pretty much agree with your entire list there. I don't think there's anyone necessarily who you need that is not on that list. Generally, I agree, Damo, that we have been spoiled in past years with high-scoring rookies, so maybe be prepared to accept some of these slow burn guys, and don't panic to get rid of them as quickly. They will have time to develop, and you need to be... Supercoach is a long game, and I know that there's been a trend for it to be played more aggressively in recent years because we have more trades. And I think that is correct in some circumstances, but that was also in years where cash generation was happening a lot faster. So this year we're reliant on some of those mid-price guys to really improve. Like if you gambled on a Jaden Short, Clayton Oliver was either if he wasn't going to be hitting 120s, he was a cash gen at, 90s to 100. Same thing with an underpriced Petrarca and a Will Day. And even in the forward line, right, we have the Caleb Daniels, the Jack McRae's who look like they're actually keepers now and not. They're back to their best football and they're not doing that. So my advice at this stage is to just make sure that you're riding the economy in an optimal way and maximizing the cash to make the moves that you believe in.
And just quickly, Elijah Sardis, we'll talk about him in a moment because he's in the injury report, but he's only going to be gone for one actual game. So he's due back in gather round. So I'm personally thinking I hold him, and I think that's the advice I'm going to give our listeners. But I do know that people have decided to move him on and keep Finn O'Sullivan. There's not there's not a wrong way to go about this. But I think Sardis has more to offer upon return than Finn O'Sullivan has, and neither would be on my field anyway. They would have the E as at best anyway.
Yeah, I think that's probably the correct advice. I think unless you're really antsy that you're not happy with the suggestion that it's only going to be 1 week plus a bye and you can't wait that long and you've missed one of the need rookies that we've mentioned, that would probably be the only circumstance where I think maybe you could, if you were willing to accept the use of trades, you could probably flip to a rookie who's going to make money for those 2 weeks and then flip back to Sardis when we know exactly what his return looks like.
So speaking of injuries and suspensions, there actually is no suspensions. Reef McInnes has ruptured his ACL. A few had him as a cash cow. He was 200k in the forward line. You have to move him on now. There's other options. There's Elijah Hewitt. Sam Powell-Pepper is another option. He really kickstarted his cash generation again.
Yeah.
83.
Pal Pringles.
His break even is now 0. So, whatever he scores, he's going to make money, even if it's only a little bit from now on. We've spoken about Elijah Sardis. Bombers are hoping he'll be available post their bye. Bailey Smith missed last week with calf tightness and is officially a test for this week, but he's been limited at training, so keep a close eye on that. Also at the Cats, Tom Stewart, who injured his PCL, received very good news and upon further scans will also be a test for this week against Brisbane. Kieran Briggs has passed through concussion protocols, is available for selection this week for GWS, which is good news for my draft side. Had to put that in there for my own self-indulgence.
Well, also bad news for Lockie Keefe truthers out there.
And popular Richmond rookie Josh Smiley is a test and will play in a VFL practice match this weekend. So we could have more rookies on the horizon. Yay!
Yeah. That's, oh God, we need them. There's too many good rookies that started this year, Damo. Too many.
Clarky, to borrow an idiom from you, our question farm is alive and well. They are looking good out there in the field and we probably need to go and rustle them up and just see what they're about.
Yes, Damo's back on the ranch. He's put on the cowboy hat. He's here. He's got the lasso. He's got the little fronds. What are they that are on the pants that they wear, like the leather thing? You know what I'm talking about, listeners. You can picture it. Picture a cowboy. That's what Damo looks like right now over at the Mailbag Ranch. And can we also note it took him like 3 weeks to buy in. It's the quickest I've ever got Damo. Anyway. Out to the ranch, Damo.
Before we do get to the questions, though, we just need to remind people who are using the question form, please make sure you are submitting your questions before 8 p.m. Melbourne time on a Wednesday to be answered for that week's football, because we're getting a lot of questions on Thursdays and Fridays, and they're just out of date by the time we get to them on the Wednesday following. So just remember, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is when you want to submit your questions, because Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we don't get to them and we can't help you.
Yes.
And we want to help you.
Yeah, and we do receive messages from people from time to time, so if you feel like it's urgent, you can message us, but I also won't guarantee that Damo and I are able to respond in time to help you make an effective decision. I am one of Damo's closest friends, and I couldn't even get a quick decision from him whether I should take Lockie Neal's vice captain score or roll with Max Gawn. Listeners, I took Lockie Neal's score, and by God, was I happy with that outcome.
That would have been my advice anyway.
Yes.
All right, first question comes from Matt. How do I burn my team and start again?
Well, Matt, unfortunately, I don't think this is possible.
Matt, I think you need to look at your team more positively. You have trades, you can make corrections. I'm sure your team is only a few trades away from getting back on track. Supercoach is a long game. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Just make sure you have all the rookies in the right places. Make sure you have some really good premiums around them that can be captain options, and your team should turn itself around and it will be okay.
And just remember, Matt, as well, dumpster fires, when they happen, usually, in most cases, the council comes around and hands you a brand new dumpster to be set on fire the next week. So don't lose faith. This is, once the fire is out, you're only a step away from another fire.
Next question. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Jeffrey Head. What do I do with Gorn? He was monstered by Sherry, and now that score is in his rolling average. Is he a trade or a hold? I only see 3 games pre-buy where I am now fairly confident he's probably monstering the other ruck. He's in my flex. He has a lot of cash. If the thoughts are to get rid of him, would it be worth spreading the cash around for upgrades this week, or fix rookies this week and give Max another week to see how he goes, even though he will likely lose 30k plus? Jeffrey, I like this question. I don't like that you're talking about trading Max Gorn, but I like this question because it brings a bit debate into the world. He's a premium that you probably expected to keep for most of the year. And I spoke about people trading out Lockie Neal after one poor score, and then he came out with a 133. There's these players that you pick because you know they are going to be fairly consistent scorers for a lot of the year, and they are players you can rely on to be, the backbone of your team. Max Gorn did not have a good game against Tristan Sherry, and there's comments as to why, but we won't speculate. I think you hold Max Gorn and just make sure you have the right rookies. So I think you fix rookies this week and give Max another week, even though he will lose cash.
This is something that I spoke about extensively whenever I would suggest Max Gorn as a starting option, which is, even if he loses money this week, you can still trade him to literally anyone with either minimal cash that you already have, or he's the most expensive ruck. So you are literally going down to Tim English, Rowan Marshall, Lloyd Meek, whoever you decide. One bad game does not make a premium. A lot of premiums have aberrations in their pricing. A lot of premiums have aberrations in their scoring. Even Max Gorn came out and said that he was soundly beaten by Sherry, and that's fine. He goes again next week against Jared Witz, right? And I think, let me double check my, historically against Gold Coast, I think it's kind of a neutral matchup for Max. Last 3 against Gold Coast, 97, 130, and 88. So probably, yeah, it's a 3 sample, which sort of skews in the term of he could easily do it, but also it's probably just as likely that it wouldn't, especially since the Gold Coast game where he scored 97 was towards the end of the season when Melbourne were soundly out of finals, I think. I don't know. It's a hold for me.
I agree. I think hold. Next question comes from Daniel. Bailey Dale or Joel Frazier? I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Frazier, just not sure how his scoring will be affected once the Dogs get their midfielders back. Whereas I don't think the mids coming back in will affect Dale's scoring. If I get Frazier, I don't know. If the answer is Frazier, he can turn a rookie into Callahan or Bailey Smith.
Bailey Dale. You know that Bailey Dale is a keeper. Why would you shy yourself away from someone who is historically a player that you can hold all year?
He mentions Dogs getting midfielders back, and that affects Frazier. If that means that Frazier goes into the back line once those midfielders are back, does that not affect Bailey Dale?
It didn't last year.
Fair enough. I think I'm also on Bailey Dale.
Sorry, am I wrong for that? Let me hang on. Let me do some quick fact checking on myself. I think that Dale ended the season quite well last year, if I remember correctly, because I remember owning him at the start of the year, trading him, and then him going on to have a relatively successful year. Yeah, look, it's okay. It's up and down. There's a variance between about 70 and 120, which is kind of the sweet spot, I guess, for a defensive premium.
Bailey Dale's at a price where he's going to be a good F5, F6, maybe F7 at worst by the end of the season. So
Yeah, especially when he
F,
gets that forward eligibility.
yeah, F. I mean D5 to 7. I don't know why everyone's an F.
You sunk
F.
my battleship. Yeah, I think out of the two, I think it depends on what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to be centrist about it, Daniel, but it's kind of what you want to do, right? Are you that hot on needing Bailey Smith, or are you that convinced that Finn Callahan is going to be someone that you keep long term? Or are you going for these guys because they're cash generating, and then you'll flip Callahan into a Lockie Neal, say, because we've been speaking nothing about just Neal all the time in this episode. So I think the real question is, are you bringing in a long-term ride or die, or are you bringing in a guy who's going to make some cash that allows you to make a decision that's more informed, say, in 6 rounds? Let's say 6 rounds is a long time, but it's also not a lot of time.
Mate, in football, a week is a long time.
Yeah. So in terms of that, I think once you decide which one of those is better for your overall strategy, you'll know which answer. I like Joel Frazier. I enjoy watching him play football. He's fantastic. I think out of the two, I'm more keen on Bailey Dale as a long-term prospect. Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Daniel.
Thanks, Dan.
Next question comes from Derek. What to do with Sheasel?
Nothing.
Hold him.
Yeah. Don't know.
He actually he has the role. He's getting pretty much maximum points from what he's doing in the role. He just needs to get his hands on it a bit more, and that game where he finally goes bang is coming.
Yeah. I blame Tom Powell.
And KSI.
Who?
Tom Powell's goal song is a KSI song.
Huh. How about that? I don't understand these kids. I'm a millennial. Bully me. Anyway, Derek, don't do anything. Don't touch him. Just leave him. You've definitely got other problems.
Sheasel. Next question comes from Sam. Is it too late to trade Perryman? Nope. 240k in the bank, so could easily become Whitfield. Also, is Christian Petrarca a concern? Christian Petrarca is not a concern.
Yeah. That's soundly answered. So yeah, Perryman, flip him. We spoke about this literally just before. Yep. He's done. His goose is cooked. He's on a bye this week. It's the perfect time to trade him. I love bringing in Lockie Whitfield. That's a great option. He's exactly what I've
done.
Yeah.
Perryman to Whitfield is exactly what I've done.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty doing the math and finding the cash to do it myself. I wanted to bring Carl Amon, full disclosure listeners, but I can't do it. He's on a bye next week. I'll bring him in next week or the week after.
Next question comes from Moore. Should I use a boost to make sure I can bring in all 3 of Connor O'Sullivan, Levi Ashcroft, and Nathan O'Driscoll on the bubble? I only used 1 trade after round 1.
I don't think you need to use all 3 of those. Connor O'Sullivan I have concerns about because, as we said before, Jake Kolodjasny is on the horizon waiting to come down into the category. We know Kolodjasny is the preferred best 22 option, despite O'Sullivan being a good footballer. I thought he played a really good game on the weekend. I don't think you need to use all 3. I think Levi and Nod priorities. O'Sullivan is a nice to have, right? So save the boost.
Yeah, and Chris Scott's also mentioned that Reece Stanley is probably going to play at some point, which pushes Sam DeConning into that backline role again as well. So I don't love Connor O'Sullivan as an option, but I do understand why people are bringing him in.
Yeah, nice to have. If you don't have him, though, you're probably not missing out.
Cons asked, it seems like the tag is back. Could you discuss some tag-proof players to make corrective trades to?
Tag-proof players, that's a good one. I don't think I can think of a player who has been bulletproof.
He's given an example of Zach Merritt, and I think Zach Merritt comes close to being tag-proof. I think Clayton Oliver doesn't get tagged. I think most people tag Christian Petrarca
Yep.
just by the fact that he can move forward and impact the scoreboard more than Clayton Oliver can.
But when Clayton Oliver is tagged, he's absolutely drowned. He's not a good option. I don't think there's any particular player who is completely bulletproof to the tag, right? I think you're probably, if your biggest concern is a premium getting tagged, then I'd probably focus more on picking players with fixtures you feel are positive. That's the best thing you can do. We know not every team has a dedicated tagger. We know who as we mentioned before, we know the two premier taggers of the league at the moment are Toby Bedford and James Jordan. We've seen everyone from Sammy Durham has done it. Will Day, I believe, in round 1. We've seen Latham Vandermeer at the Bulldogs do it at some point. We also saw the Bulldogs this week we saw Footscray against Collingwood not bother to even tag Nick Dacos. So I think it's coming back in a fashion, but only for certain teams that it works for their game style. I think we're going to see a lot more run with, which creates more variance. Focus on picking premiums who you are confident in their schedule. You are going to have weeks where, and I'm going to bring it back. Lockie Neal. You have premiums who are going to have poor weeks, and then the same premium in their team is going to have a great week. You've got Lockie Neal and Josh Dunkley. You've got Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver. You've got Tom Powell and LDU, right? Or even Harry Sheasel.
Tom Green and Finn Callahan.
An absolutely great example. So sometimes Jai Newcomb and Will Day, two sides of the same coin. So maybe sometimes the question isn't necessarily about picking the tag-proof players, but if you're worried about the tag, maybe pick the second guy up, the non-preferred target. You could probably even say maybe no, sorry. You know what? That's gross. I'm not going to suggest Matt Crouch or a Jordan Dawson type, but you understand where I'm going with that. I don't suggest that in any capacity. I would like to publicly say that I do not endorse trading in Adelaide midfielders that aren't Jordan Dawson. I think that's the best. I think that's the best tactic, and I hope that helps.
Well said.
Yeah.
He's got a second question, Con. He wants to know Jason Horne-Francis to go straight to the bin, do not pass go, or not.
Nah, man. He was playing full forward for part of the day. What do you expect him to do?
I have a feeling that Port Adelaide jumped the gun expecting him to be tagged, and then the tag just never came. No one really matched up on him in the forward line either. So I think Port Adelaide jumped the gun a little bit with how they used him against Richmond, but he's in the forward line, the premiums are going to be hard to come by until the dual position players put in round 6, and then again later in the season in the various rounds that happens. So I don't think we're in a luxury where we can move Jason Horne-Francis to just anyone and it'll be fine. I really think that it's Horne-Francis, McRae, Smith, Daniel, Rankin, and then we don't really know apart from those guys. And
Nick Larkey.
Ideally, you probably want all 5 of those guys in your team by the end of the year anyway. So to trade Jason Horne-Francis out, you're probably going to be wanting to trade him back in later, and you don't know what's around the corner, so you might not get the opportunity to trade him back in, and then you miss out, and then that's someone you've missed in your team. So I think you got to hold Jason Horne-Francis. You got to back in some of the premiums through their rough patches.
Yeah, hey, I'm just voicing some questions out loud for you, Damo, that we can spitball here. How far away is Butters? 3 weeks?
Butters is 6 weeks.
Still 6 more weeks? Yeah.
Still 6 more weeks, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I think we look at this score of Horne-Francis, we think, as you said, expected a tag that didn't come, and then he gave away a bunch of frees. So put it in context of the game, it's actually relatively flattering because it wasn't Horne-Francis's finest performance, but we know what he's capable of. First week it's a bit of the Perrymans about it, isn't it? Where you can excuse it based on contexts, but I'm a little bit more convinced that Horn Francis will have the role. And especially when Butters is back, right? You've got Rosie, Butters, Horn Francis, who else? Willem Drew and those guys running through that midfield. Horn Francis is not going to be the number one attention grabber when you've got Butters in the team. So, as Damo said, forward premiums are hard to come by. You got to kind of ride him, and his price is only going to matter if you're planning on trading him out, which is not the reason why you would have started him, because he was, the most expensive forward?
Yes. Yep.
One of them, yeah, one of the most expensive forwards. So you wouldn't have started him without the expectation that you were going to hold him all year. So I probably wouldn't even worry about the number until you'll know when it gets really dire. It's week 2.
Next question comes from Tim, one of the many Tims that we have who writing us in questions.
The nebulous Tim Blob has submitted another question. Thank you, Tim.
My team is a dumpster fire. I went mid-price madness because it felt good, as per your advice to my question in round 1. Clark, yeah, our advice might be coming back to bite us.
No,
but it's actually some rookies and primos that have let me down the most. Most will be boosting this week. Do you think we should be maxing points on field or cash gen with best 18 for the next few weeks?
So, Tim, my Damo probably has a very, very measured statement, and I want to straight up apologize for hey, look, you felt good for a minute, you flew too close to the sun, Icarus, but I want you to feel comfortable in a sense that you are not the only person who is feeling pain from a bit of mid-price madness at the moment. You're not alone in that, and there are a lot of people who are currently trying to resolve the debacle so that they can feel comfortable with their teams over the next few weeks. We're still within sight of the start line. The gun's only just gone off. Everybody started running, and you're genuinely probably not as far behind the top ranks as you think in terms of a 24-week season. So don't be too hard on yourself for starting a team that you felt confident in at the time, because Supercoach hindsight is something that people tend to twist to make you feel bad about something that you couldn't have predicted.
He mentions, do we think we should be maxing points on field or cash gen with best 18 for the next few weeks? Well, you need cash generation to upgrade your team, to improve your team as the season goes on. If you are worried about points on field each week, then maybe then it's more of a daily fantasy mindset than a full season salary cap kind of situation that is in your mind. So I think you just got to make sure that you've got all the cash generation pieces in place. You've got some nice premiums who can provide you captaincy options. Even mid prices are starting to offer captaincy caliber points, like Jack McRae is one of them. Even Caleb Daniel is one of them. But yeah, I think with best 18, focus on cash generation, and then when you reach gather round in round 5, hopefully everything has settled down and everything is fine.
Yeah. So I think in terms of just slightly adding a little bit more, if are you disappointed in your rookies' scores, or are you disappointed in their break evens? I think determining that is probably the only other thing that I would add to you, Nebulous Tim, is deciding whether or not, hey, I've only got rookies and they're scoring 50, but their break evens are actually in the negatives or extremely low, so they are going to make money. Or are you worried about you can bring in any primo that you want to upgrade those mid prices, and they could absolutely do horribly this week. That's the game. That's the game, Tim. So Nebulous Tim, I wish you all the best in your trades this week, and I hope everything goes your way, because, like I said, don't worry, it'll get better, and you will always do the thing that you thought is best at the time. So don't use hindsight to put yourself down.
And then the last question today comes from HQ. He wants to know, what's the structure we should be aiming for come round 5 when it is back to full squads?
I'm aiming personally to turn my team back into Guns and Rookies somehow. Is that a possibility? The closest thing to like a juice cleanse for the Supercoach world.
Yeah, ideally by round 5, you've got all of the good rookies, you've got some good premiums, you're kind of recovered from the early season haywire injury curse that doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. But yeah, by round 5, you basically want a perfectly humming vehicle that is sliding down the highway and just, picking up good points along the way.
Yeah, I think by then you probably want to make sure that if you did have mid prices, that you have jumped off the ones who are not meeting your expectations by them. So either cashing them into rookies who are making you money or cashing them into premiums who are scoring consistently. And you want to make sure that you have, let's say, 75 to 80% of the rookies that are generating cash. So we're talking rookies that are best 22, have negative or low break evens, and present you with enough fieldable options that you can make up those bottom end points. So I think that's where I'm sitting, which is sort of similar, pretty much what you were saying, Damo. But I think that's just my mindset of where I'm at right now, where I want to be off these mid price guys who have failed. So the Jaden Shorts, the Perrymans, the Peatlings, and on to the mid price guys that are succeeding, the Daniels, the McRaes, the Smiths, if Bailey Smith happens to come back by then. Touch wood that the injury is not severe, so he could be in either category. And you want to be on the guys that are, you want to be on the premiums that you need to be on. No injuries. Keep fighting the good fight.
Very good. Well, that was a good herd of questions. We can now send them back into the field until next week.
Yes, as we know, all of our mail goes on to live rich and fulfilling lives out in the mailbag fields. The paddocks are full of questions, old and new, and we are always getting new questions in. So thank you very much, listeners. Just make sure that they're in our paddocks by 8 p.m. Wednesdays, Melbourne time.
Keep a lookout for our traffic lights across our socials and on our website. Our traffic lights are a guide where we'll grade some players each week, and they will either be awarded a green, yellow, or red rating. Green indicates a good pick, yellow is a watch or a hold, and red is a trade or avoid. A player could earn their rating for several reasons, including but not limited to scoring potential, job security, price point, reliability, or injury status. It will be posted shortly after teams drop on a Thursday, with an update on Friday if needed once Sunday teams confirmed.
Excellent. Damo, it's time now that we tell the listeners to go and listen to Pigmentality's captain's video, but we also provide you with advice on our captain selections for this week from our own teams. Damo, who is your vice captain for round 3? God, is it round 3?
My vice captain is Jack McRae.
Excellent. I will be joining you on that. Jack McRae and the St Kilda Saints come up against Richmond at Marvel Stadium on the Saturday, I believe, at 4:15. I've got it up here. Other notables include, I'd probably say, if you happen to own maybe a Cripps or a Chera against Footscray, the Bulldogs on Friday if you're feeling spicy. I'd probably be avoiding the Melbourne Gold Coast game because Melbourne are a shit club. But Noah Anderson has been playing quite well. And Damo, who is your captain for this week?
Tristan Sherry.
Damo, we are 2 peas in a little pod in our little ranch. Yeah, I will also be captaining Sherry against Riley O'Brien on Sunday, 3:20, where the Crows face off against North at Adelaide Oval. I think Riley O'Brien probably presents a positive matchup for Tristan Sherry, who just monstered Max Gawn, and if that's what he can do against Gawn, I hate to be any other ruckman in the league. Damo, if you had to pick another captain or vice captain option, do you have any other recommendations for our wonderful listeners?
I don't mind a Sarong or a Brayshaw against West Coast. I also don't mind a Lockie Whitfield against Hawthorn. Those are probably the two that stand out to me. I had originally thought about Lachie Neale against Geelong, but apparently, despite being postponed and rescheduled because of a hurricane and bad weather, this game will still be in bad weather. So I am not putting anything.
The irony.
So I am not putting the vice captaincy or captaincy on Lachie Neale for that reason. But I wouldn't be surprised if he does pump out a 115 to 120 score anyway. Yes, so those guys are the ones I'm probably thinking about the most.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. It's a bit of a tough one matchup wise this week because I think we can both say that the season so far has been a bit. It's not quite what we expected, right? Teams that we sort of expected to be around about the upstairs mark or down the bottom of the stairs because they've fallen off it. Looking at Melbourne, Fremantle, Carlton at the bottom of those stairs in a crumpled heap. And we've seen teams like Adelaide and even North Melbourne, I'd say, have really spread their wings and shown clubs that, hey, we're here. We're not as bad as you thought we were. So it's a bit of a tough one to pick, I think, matchup wise. We're still in that early stage, but as always, and we quite often do this, we recommend that you go check out someone else's content, but very, very much friend of the show, Pig Mentality. I hope he doesn't mind. He probably won't mind us calling him friend of the show. Friend of the show, Pig Mentality, does a captain's video every week, which after you finish listening to this podcast, you should go watch. Just chuck it on YouTube, chuck it in your ears, and he provides some really good evidence-based research into captains.
And that's it for this episode of the Footy Mailbag. Thanks, Clarky. That was awesome.
I always get thanked, and that's good. That's really fulfills my praise kink.
Yeah, I don't know if you thanked me last week.
No, I never do. It's a thankless job running this show, Damo. You should know that.
Well, I'm thanking you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I think we did good. I hope we answered your questions, listeners. Thank you so much for your questions. The most important thank yous, Damo, to our listeners.
If you haven't given us a rating on your listening platform of choice, please do so. It helps new listeners find us. You can find us at the Footy Mailbag on pretty much every social media there is. For myself, it is at DamoSC on Twitter, add an underscore after that for my Instagram. Clarky is at QuantumJC on Twitter, and you can also check out his other podcast, The Falcon, at Falcon Footy Pod.
Yeah, this week we talked about which mascots we would like to, air quotes, draft, captain, trade, and make of that what you will, listeners. It was all of our teams lost on both podcasts this week, so they've been a bit. We didn't want to talk about football, really.
Don't blame you. I don't want to talk about football either.
But also, listeners, don't forget to head over to thefootymailbag.net where you can find our podcast feed, you can find written content, you can find merch, and you can also find the traffic lights and links to all of our socials through our link tree. But most importantly, as I tell you every week, if you need to get off social media because the world is on fire and you don't need that in your life, you are trying to just go and live it, you can also use our question form on the website, and we will answer your questions to the show through there.
As long as they are in before 8 p.m. on a Wednesday.
8 p.m. on a Wednesday. We cannot possibly make this Melbourne time. I'm in Melbourne. Damo's in the far, far made-up land of Chicken Treat and Western Australia, if that even is a real thing. So we're talking Melbourne time. We're talking Eastern. We're talking Vic Bubble time. 8 p.m. Wednesdays. We record after that.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk next time.